The wind across the high prairie was a constant thing, a low whistle through the dry grass that spoke of emptiness and vast, lonely distances. For a man like Ben, it was a familiar song. He was a man of few words and simple needs, a cowboy whose life was measured in seasons, herd counts, and the slow wearing of leather. His face was a map of sun and wind, his hands tough as the saddle he rode in on. Today's task was a solitary one, checking a long stretch of fence line on the remote southern edge of the ranch, a place where the land started to crumple into rocky, unforgiving hills. He rode his old gelding, Sam, a horse as steady and quiet as Ben himself. The only sounds were the creak of the saddle, the soft thud of hooves on hard-packed earth, and that endless wind. The sky was a bowl of flawless blue, making the isolation feel complete. As he guided Sam along a dry creek bed, a flash of unnatural color caught his eye. Tucked against the bank, half hidden by a scraggly sagebrush, was a wooden crate. It wasn't old or weathered, its wood was still pale, the nails shiny. Someone had driven it out here recently, to this place where no one had reason to be. A frown etched deeper lines on Ben's face. Litter made him angry. The pristine wildness of this place was a thing he respected, and dumping trash in it was a particular kind of disrespect. He swung down from the saddle, his boots sending up little puffs of dust. He tied Sam's reins to the brush and walked over, intending to break the thing apart and carry the pieces out. As he got closer, he saw the crate was sturdy, about the size of a large apple box, and it was sealed shut not just with nails, but with heavy-duty straps. That was odd. This wasn't discarded packaging. This was something someone had wanted to secure. A low, uneasy feeling settled in his gut. He crouched beside it, the hair on the back of his neck prickling despite the sun's warmth. He listened. At first, there was nothing but the wind. Then, he heard it. A faint, rustling scrape from inside the box. An animal, he thought. Probably a prairie dog or a snake that had found its way in. He knocked on the side of the crate with his knuckles. "Hey! Get on out of there!" The rustling stopped. Silence returned, heavier than before. Ben pulled his work glove off with his teeth, reached for his pocket knife, and flicked the blade open. He sliced through the plastic straps, the sound loud in the quiet. Using the knife's tip, he began to carefully pry at the lid, the nails squealing in protest as he worked them loose. The smell hit him first, a warm, scared animal smell, mixed with a sour tang of urine and something else, something profoundly unsettling. It was the scent of fear and abandonment. He lifted the lid and peered inside, blocking the sun with his body. For a long, frozen moment, his brain refused to make sense of what he was seeing. Crumpled in a corner on a bed of old, stained rags was not a wild animal. It was a child. A little boy, no more than 4 or 5 years old, curled into a tight ball. He was painfully thin, dressed in dirty jeans and a faded red t-shirt. His face was buried in his knees, a mop of dark, matted hair the only visible feature. Ben's heart gave a single, hard thud against his ribs, then seemed to stop altogether. The world narrowed to the crate, the boy, and the roaring silence in his own ears. He was a man who had faced charging bulls, blinding blizzards, and 100 other dangers on the range. But this sight emptied him of all thought, all breath. "Hey," Ben whispered, his voice rough and unfamiliar. "Hey, son." The small figure didn't move. A terrible coldness swept through Ben. Had he found a crate with a child's body? But then, he saw the slight, shuddering rise of the boy's narrow back. He was alive. Alive and shut in a box in the middle of nowhere. Ben's hands, usually so sure and strong, trembled as he reached into the crate. He moved with a slow caution he'd use for a newborn calf, terrified of causing more harm. "It's all right," he murmured, the words feeling useless. "I got you. You're all right now." As his fingers brushed the boy's bony shoulder, the child flinched violently, scrambling further into the corner of the crate like a trapped rabbit. He lifted his head. His eyes were huge, dark pools in a pale, dirt-streaked face. They held a terror so deep and complete it was like a physical blow to Ben's chest. The boy's lips were cracked, his cheeks hollow. Then, The child spoke. His voice was a dry, broken whisper, so small it was almost swallowed by the wind. It wasn't a cry for help. It wasn't a scream. It was a question, a statement of such shattered reality that it would echo in Ben's soul for the rest of his days. The tiny voice asked, Did you come back? 3 simple words. 5 syllables. They broke the cowboy's heart clean in 2. They implied a waiting. A hope that the monster who did this would return. That this was somehow normal. Ben felt a surge of nausea and a rage so pure and white-hot it blurred his vision. He had to close his eyes for a second, fighting to master himself. This child needed calm, not a man's fury. No, boy, Ben said, his own voice thick. He cleared his throat, forcing gentleness into it. No, I'm not them. I'm Ben. I'm here to help you. You're safe now. The boy stared, uncomprehending. The hope that had flickered for a second in his eyes at his own question died, replaced by a deeper confusion. He didn't know what safe meant. Moving with infinite care, Ben slid his hands under the small, fragile body. The boy was as light as a bundle of twigs. He didn't fight, but he was stiff with terror, his little hands clutching the ragged fabric of his own shirt. Ben lifted him from the confines of the crate, cradling him against his own worn denim jacket. The child felt icy cold, even in the sun. Ben carried him over to a patch of clean grass in the shade of the creek bank and sat down, holding him. He unscrewed the cap of his canteen with one hand and offered it. The boy looked at the water, then at Ben's face, before leaning forward and drinking in small, desperate gulps. Water dripped down his chin. Ben gently wiped it away with his thumb, an instinctive gesture that felt both alien and deeply right. We're gonna get you home, Ben said softly, though he had no idea where home was. He looked back at the crate, a stark, ugly monument against the beautiful land. Who could do this? And why here? This wasn't a random spot. This was a place to make something, or someone, disappear forever. Sam, sensing the tension, whickered softly. The sound made the boy jump. That's just Sam, Ben said. He's a friend. He's gonna carry us out of here. The boy's eyes darted to the horse, wide with a new fear. Ben knew he couldn't just put him on the saddle. He had to move slowly. He stood up, keeping the child securely in his arms. He walked slowly over to Sam, talking in a low, steady stream about nothing in particular, about how Sam liked apples, about the clouds, about the fence they were supposed to be checking. It was the gentle, rambling tone he used with skittish colts. He mounted the horse carefully, settling the boy in front of him, wrapped securely in the circle of his arms. The child was trembling. Ben pulled his jacket tighter around him. Hold on now, he whispered. We're going for a ride. He turned Sam's head away from the creek bed, away from the horrible crate. He would have to call the sheriff. He would have to report this. But for now, his only job was to get this tiny, shattered life to warmth and safety. As Sam began to walk steadily back the way they had come, Ben looked down at the dark head resting against his chest. The boy was still awake, his body rigid, staring out at the passing landscape with those ancient, terrified eyes. Ben thought of the question. Did you come back? The words coiled in his heart, a poisonous snake. Someone had left this child here. Someone had promised to return. And someone had lied. The ride back to the ranch house was the longest of Ben's life. Every jostle of the saddle felt like a cruelty inflicted upon the fragile boy in his arms. The child, whose name Ben still did not know, did not cry. He did not speak again. He simply sat, a statue of silent shock, his small hands now loosely fisted in the fabric of Ben's shirt, as if it were the only anchor in a terrifying sea. Ben kept up his gentle monologue, a steady murmur against the boy's temple, speaking of the hawk circling high above, the smell of sage after a rain, anything to fill the horrible quiet. By the time the low outline of the ranch house appeared in the distance, the flawless blue sky had begun to bruise with clouds rolling in from the west. The wind picked up, carrying a new, damp chill. Sam, sensing home and an impending storm, quickened his pace. Marta, Ben's wife of 30 years, was on the porch shaking out a rug. She was a woman of sturdy build and calm eyes, used to the rhythms and surprises of ranch life. But the sight of her husband riding in, cradling a child like a wounded lamb, made her freeze. The rug fell forgotten to the wooden planks. Her hand flew to her mouth as Ben drew closer, and she saw the pallor of the boy's face, the dirt, the profound stillness. Ben. Good Lord, whose child is that? She breathed, rushing down the steps. Don't know, Ben said, his voice gravelly with spent emotion. He handed the boy down to Marta's waiting arms as carefully as passing a holy relic. Found him. In a crate. Out by the old creek bed in the south section. Marta's eyes met his over the boy's head, a flash of horror and understanding passing between them. Without another word, her motherly instincts, dormant since their own children had grown and left, surged to the fore. Hush now, you're safe, she cooed, her voice a warm balm after Ben's ragged tones. She carried the boy into the house, heading straight for the kitchen, the heart of the home. Ben secured Sam in the barn, moving with a frantic haste he usually reserved for emergencies. He gave the horse a quick rub-down and a double measure of oats, a silent thank you. His mind was already leaping ahead. The crate. The sheriff. He hurried back to the house, the first heavy drops of rain beginning to splatter in the dust. Inside, the world had shifted. The boy was sitting at the broad kitchen table, wrapped in one of Marta's soft quilts. He was clutching a mug of warm milk with both hands, staring into its depths as if it held secrets. A plate with a slice of buttered bread sat untouched before him. Marta moved quietly, putting a kettle on for tea, her every movement designed to be non-threatening. Ben went to the wall phone in the hallway, the old rotary dial heavy in his hand. He called the sheriff's office in town, 20 miles away. The dispatcher, a woman named Linda, listened with growing alarm. A child? In a crate? Are you sure, Ben? I'm sure, Ben said flatly. Send Dale out. And tell him to bring someone who knows about kids. From social services or something. This ain't right. He hung up and returned to the kitchen doorway, leaning against the frame, watching. Marta had sat down beside the boy, not too close. She was speaking in that same soft, steady voice. Can you tell me your name, sweetheart? My name is Marta. That's Ben. What should we call you? The boy's eyes flickered up to her face, then back to the milk. His lips moved, but no sound came out. He took a tiny, shuddering breath. And then, the whisper. So faint Ben had to strain to hear it from across the room. Leo. The name was a gift, a tiny fragment of himself offered up. Marta's smile was tender. Leo. That's a strong, fine name. It's good to meet you, Leo. Ben felt a lump form in his throat. Leo. He had a name now. The child in the crate was Leo. For the next hour, as the storm broke outside, lashing the windows with rain, they kept the kitchen warm and quiet. Leo did not eat the bread, but he sipped all the milk. He allowed Marta to wash his face and hands with a warm cloth with a quiet, passive acceptance that was worse than any struggle. He flinched at the rumble of thunder, shrinking into the quilt. Ben pulled the curtains closed to hide the lightning flashes. The sheriff's truck arrived just as the storm began to ease into a steady downpour. Sheriff Dale Jenkins was a tall, lean man in his 50s, with a kind but weary face. With him was a younger woman, introduced as Anna from Child Protective Services. Her eyes were sharp and compassionate, taking in the scene instantly. The story had to be told again. Ben led Dale out to the barn, away from Leo, and described the finding in terse, painful detail. The new crate, the straps, the smell, the tiny voice asking its devastating question. Dale's jaw tightened, his pen scratching notes on a damp pad. You didn't touch anything else? Just the straps and the lid. Just what I had to get him out, Ben said. It's all still out there. We'll need to go out there at first light, before any more rain washes things away, Dale said, his voice grim. Can you take us? Ben nodded. He would take them to the gates of hell if it meant finding who did this. Back inside, Anna was sitting at the table with Leo and Marta. She had a small teddy bear from her bag, which Leo looked at but did not touch. She was asking gentle, careful questions. Leo, do you know your last name? Do you know how you got in the box? Leo's only response was to pull the quilt up over his mouth, his eyes darting to Ben, then back to the table. He hasn't said more than his name, Marta said softly, her hand resting protectively on the back of Leo's chair. Anna nodded. The trauma is profound. He may not be able to tell us anything useful for a while, if ever. We'll need to get him to the clinic in town, check him over. He'll need to come with me tonight. The words landed in the quiet kitchen like a stone. Marta's face fell. Ben stiffened. The thought of this tiny broken boy being taken away, loaded into another vehicle, handed over to more strangers, felt viscerally wrong. He just got warm, Ben heard himself say, his voice rough. He's scared of the thunder. Can't he stay here tonight? Just for the night. Anna looked at him with understanding but firm professionalism. I know your hearts are in the right place, and what you did was heroic. But protocol is clear in a case like this. He needs a medical evaluation and a formal, secure foster placement while we try to locate his family. This is a crime scene, Ben. The term crime scene hung in the air. It made the warm kitchen feel suddenly cold. Leo was not just a lost boy. He was evidence. As Anna began to gather her things, preparing to leave, Leo seemed to sense the shift. The passive stillness shattered. His eyes, wide with a fresh panic, locked onto Ben. He pushed the quilt away and slid off the chair. Before anyone could move, he darted across the kitchen floor and wrapped his thin arms tightly around Ben's leg, burying his face against the damp denim. He didn't cry out. He just held on, a silent, desperate barnacle. Everyone froze. Marta's hand went to her heart. Anna paused, her professional resolve softening into something more human. Ben looked down at the small, dark head pressed against him. He slowly, carefully, placed a large, calloused hand on Leo's back. He could feel the frantic beat of the little heart through the quilt. It's all right, Leo, Ben murmured, his own heart cracking open a little wider. These are good people. They're gonna help you. But Leo just clung tighter. In that moment, Ben understood. In Leo's shattered world, Ben was not just a rescuer. He was the one who had opened the crate. He was the first face that hadn't lied. He was the only safety the boy could recognize. Anna let out a slow breath. Given the circumstances, and the storm, and his clear attachment, she said quietly, looking from Leo to the older couple. A temporary, one-night emergency placement here, under your supervision, might be in his best interest tonight. But first thing in the morning, I have to take him. No exceptions. Relief flooded through Ben and Marta. It was a small victory, a single night of sanctuary. That night, they made up a bed for Leo on the old sofa in the living room, close to the fireplace Marta lit to chase away the storm's chill. They gave him one of Ben's soft, old t-shirts to sleep in. He still did not speak, but he watched their every move. When Ben sat in his armchair nearby, Leo's eyes followed him, only closing when exhaustion finally overtook fear. Ben didn't sleep. He sat in the dim light of the dying fire, listening to the soft, even breaths of the sleeping child and the patter of rain on the roof. He stared at his own rough hands, hands that could rope a calf or fix a broken engine. They felt useless now. The question echoed, "Did you come back?" And a new, more terrifying question formed in the quiet. Who, in God's name, was Leo waiting for in that crate? And what would they do when they realized he was gone? Dawn came gray and washed clean. The storm had passed, leaving the world dripping and smelling of wet earth and sage. Inside the ranch house, the quiet was fragile, charged with the unspoken dread of the coming separation. Leo was awake, sitting upright on the sofa still wrapped in the quilt. He watched Marta move around the kitchen making pancakes, his eyes following the familiar, gentle rhythm of her movements. He had eaten a few small bites for breakfast, a silent victory. Ben sat at the table, nursing a cup of black coffee, his gaze constantly drawn back to the boy. The temporary peace of the night was evaporating with the morning mist. Sheriff Dale and Anna arrived just as the sun broke through the clouds. Their presence was a cold reminder of the world outside this warm kitchen, a world of procedures and harsh truths. Leo stiffened at the sight of them, his small hands clutching the quilt. "We need to head out to the site, Ben," Dale said, his voice low. "Before any more weather or critters disturb it." Ben nodded. He looked at Leo, then at Marta. "I'll be back soon," he said, though the words felt hollow. He wasn't sure who he was reassuring. The ride out to the dry creek bed was somber. The land sparkled with rainwater, and the air was fresh, a cruel contrast to their grim purpose. Dale drove his county SUV, with Anna following in her sedan. Ben rode in the passenger seat, directing them in terse sentences. The crate looked even more obscene in the clean morning light. It was a stark, man-made wound on the landscape. Dale and a deputy who had met them there began their work with a solemn, methodical efficiency. They took photographs from every angle, measured distances, and dusted the outside of the crate for fingerprints. Ben stood back, his arms crossed, a knot of cold anger tightening in his stomach as he watched. This was where someone had decided Leo's life was disposable. Dale carefully examined the interior. He picked through the stained rags with gloved hands. No identifying marks on the crate. No labels. Straps are common hardware store stuff. He sighed, straightening up. Whoever did this didn't want him traced. This was deliberate. Then, tucked deep in a fold of the foulest rag, the deputy found something. It wasn't much. A small, plastic toy soldier, green and worn, missing its rifle. It was the kind of toy that might live in the bottom of a pocket, a silent companion. Dale bagged it carefully. It was the first faint whisper of Leo's life before the crate. "We'll run what we can, but without prints or paperwork." Dale didn't finish the sentence. The wind filled the silence. Back at the ranch house, the moment had come. Leo was dressed in clean clothes Marta had hastily acquired from a neighbor with a younger grandson, simple jeans and a blue sweater that was still a little too big. He looked small and lost in them. Anna knelt before him, her voice soft. "Okay, Leo. It's time for us to go to town. We're going to see a nice doctor, and then you'll go to a very kind lady's house. You'll be safe there." Leo's eyes shot past her to Ben, who stood by the door, his hat in his hands. The boy's lower lip trembled, the first real sign of emotion since his silent clinging the night before. He took a shaky step toward Ben, then stopped, confusion and fear warring on his face. Ben felt something tear inside him. He walked over and crouched down, bringing himself to Leo's eye level. He didn't touch him, just held his gaze. "You listen to Anna," Ben said, his voice thick but steady. "She's gonna take good care of you. And I will come and see you. I promise." It was a promise he had no right to make, a thread of hope he cast out into the boy's abyss. Leo searched his face, looking for the lie, finding none. Slowly, he gave a single, tiny nod. He allowed Anna to take his hand. Marta pressed a paper bag into Anna's free hand. "Some cookies for the road," she whispered, her eyes bright with unshed tears. They watched from the porch as Leo was buckled into the back seat of Anna's car. He didn't wave. He just stared out the window at them, his face a pale moon against the glass, until the car disappeared down the long dirt road in a cloud of dust. The silence that settled over the ranch house was deafening. It was a living thing, filled with the ghost of a child's whisper and the echo of his silence. Ben felt a hollowness he hadn't known since his own sons left home, but this was sharper, edged with worry and fury. He threw himself into work, brutal, physical labor, trying to outrun the image of Leo's face in the car window. But the questions circled like vultures. Who was Leo? Where did he come from? The sheriff had found no missing child reports matching his description from the surrounding counties. It was as if he had simply materialized inside that crate. Days turned into a week. Ben called the sheriff's office every other day. The updates were always the same. No leads. The toy soldier was generic, sold in buckets at discount stores. The rags were common. Leo, in his protective shell of trauma, had not offered any more clues to Anna or the kind foster mother he was placed with. He barely spoke, ate little, and had nightmares. The only thing he had asked for, Anna shared quietly with Ben, was the cowboy. He had not said Ben's name, just the title, as if Ben were a character from a story, the only safe archetype in his broken world. The helplessness gnawed at Ben. He was a man of action, used to fixing broken fences and mending sick animals. He couldn't mend this. He and Marta drove into town to visit, as Ben had promised. The visits were quiet, stiff affairs in a tidy living room that smelled of lemony polish. Leo would sit close to Ben on the sofa, sometimes leaning ever so slightly against his arm, but he wouldn't play or talk. The connection was still there, a thin, taut wire, but the life was draining from the boy in this sterile waiting room of a life. Then, one evening, the phone rang. It was Dale, and his voice had a new, urgent edge. Ben, we got something. Not much, but it's something. A trucker. He was refueling at the gas station out on the interstate, the one near the turnoff to your South Range. About 4 days before you found Leo. He remembers a beat-up, white panel van. Said a man and a woman were arguing heatedly by the pumps. He didn't think much of it until he saw our bulletin. He said the woman was holding a little boy's hand. The boy was crying. The man shoved a big wooden crate into the back of the van before they sped off. Ben's grip on the receiver turned his knuckles white. Did he get a plate? A description. Partial plate. States. And he described the woman. Young. Tired-looking. Long brown hair. The man, he didn't see well. But Ben. He said the woman called the boy by a name. The world held its breath. What name? She called him Lee. Just Lee. Could be short for Leo, right? It was a thread, gossamer thin, but it was the first link to the people who had done this. A white panel van. A partial plate. An argument at a gas station. It meant Leo had been on a journey. It meant someone had been frantic, angry, desperate enough to abandon a child in the middle of nowhere. We're widening the search, putting out the description, Dale said. But I'll be honest, it's a long shot. That night, Ben sat on the porch in the dark. The vast prairie sky was littered with cold, distant stars. The image of the woman, young, tired, with long brown hair, haunted him. Was she Leo's mother? Was she a victim too, forced into this horror? Or was she a monster? The man who drove the van, who nailed the crate shut, what darkness lived in his heart? And then, a new, more chilling thought settled over him. The crate had been placed deliberately on his land, in a remote corner, yes, but still on his land. Was it random? Or had someone known it was a vast, lonely ranch where a crate might not be found for weeks, if ever? The question asterisk, did you come back? Asterisk took on a new, sinister dimension. Had Leo been told someone specific was coming back? Not the monsters in the van, but someone else? Ben was no longer just a rescuer. He was a witness, and now, perhaps, a piece of the puzzle himself. The isolation of his ranch, once a solace, now felt exposed. The wind in the grass sounded less like a song and more like a murmur of secrets. Leo was safe in a foster home, but the people who put him in the crate were still out there. And if they had chosen this place, they might know exactly where Ben lived. Have you ever had a piece of information, a small detail that seemed insignificant at first, suddenly change everything you thought you knew about a situation? The thread from the trucker's memory led nowhere. The partial plate matched hundreds of white panel vans across 3 states. The search expanded and then stagnated. Leo remained in his foster home, a quiet shadow in a system overflowing with quiet shadows. Ben and Marta visited every week, a ritual that was both a balm and a fresh wound. Leo would still lean into Ben's solid presence, a silent sunflower seeking the only sun he trusted, but the light inside him seemed to dim with each passing day. He spoke only in monosyllables, if at all. The foster mother, a patient woman named Helen, said he woke screaming from nightmares about the dark box. Ben felt the investigation slipping into the cold case files. His frustration was a slow burn. He started doing his own quiet, unofficial digging. He visited the gas station on the interstate, talked to the cashier who had been working that shift. The man remembered the argument too, recalled the woman looking scared, not mad. He said the little boy had been begging for a soda, crying, and the man had barked at him to shut up. It was a snapshot of misery, but it gave no direction. The ranch felt different now. The wide open spaces felt less like freedom and more like exposure. Ben found himself checking locks he'd never locked, scanning the horizon line not for cattle, but for strange vehicles. The image of the white van was seared into his mind. He took to riding the fence lines more often, especially the southern boundary, his eyes scanning the ground for anything else that didn't belong. It was on one of these solitary rides, nearly a month after finding Leo, that the second thread appeared. Sam, picking his way along the rocky base of a low hill, shied at something. Not a snake, but a flash of color caught in a thorny bush. Ben dismounted. It was a woman's hair clip, cheap and plastic, shaped like a butterfly. It was faded and cracked, but not weathered for years. It had been there for weeks, maybe months. His pulse quickened. It was near the dry creek bed, but not the direct path from the main road. Someone had come a different way, on foot, through rougher terrain. He bagged the clip in a bandana and took it straight to Dale. The sheriff was skeptical but thorough. He had it checked for prints, none, and added it to the meager evidence file. It could be from a hiker, Ben. From years ago. It's not weathered enough, Ben insisted, a stubborn certainty hardening in him. And hikers don't come out here. This was dropped by someone who didn't want to be seen driving right up to the spot. The clip, like the toy soldier, was a whisper. It suggested a woman, perhaps the same woman from the gas station. It suggested she had been out here before, maybe to scout the location. The premeditation of it chilled Ben to the bone. This wasn't a sudden, desperate act. It was planned. The break came from an unexpected direction. A social worker in a county 2 states over, reviewing missing persons bulletins, saw the sketch of Leo's face and felt a jolt of recognition. It wasn't a perfect match to a file she had, but it was close. The file was for a woman, not a child. A young mother named Liza, who had fled a dangerous domestic situation with her son, Lee, over 2 months ago. She had family in the West, she'd said. She was trying to get to them. Then, she and Lee had vanished from the radar of the support system that was trying to help her. Liza had long brown hair. Dale received the fax with her photo and details. He drove out to the ranch immediately. Ben studied the grainy photocopy of a driver's license photo. The woman was young, with kind eyes and a weary smile. Her son's name was Lee. Her listed partner, the man she had fled, was named Roy. Roy had a record: assault, intimidation, threats. He was a trucker who owned a white panel van for hauling equipment. The pieces, jagged and horrifying, began to click into place. Liza had run from Roy. She had been trying to reach family, maybe in California. Roy had found her. The argument at the gas station was him catching up. And then he had done the unthinkable. But why abandon the boy? Was it pure malice? A final, cruel punishment to Liza? Or was there something else? A statewide alert went out for Roy and his van. The police in Liza's home state had questions for him about her disappearance, too. She was still missing. The focus shifted from a simple case of child abandonment to a potential homicide investigation. Leo was not just abandoned, he was likely the sole witness to his mother's fate. The news sent Ben reeling. He thought of the hair clip in the thorns. Had Liza dropped it as Roy dragged her away? Had Leo seen it all? The horror the child contained behind his silent eyes was greater than anyone had imagined. That weekend's visit with Leo was different. The boy was listless, curled in an armchair. Helen pulled Ben aside. He's been worse since the police came to talk to me, to ask about his mother. He must have overheard. He hasn't eaten today. Ben sat on the floor near Leo's chair, not crowding him. He didn't speak of mothers or vans or bad men. He talked about Sam, about a new calf with spotted ears, about the way the rain smelled on hot dirt. He was just a steady, calm voice in the room. After a long silence, Leo's own small voice, rusted from disuse, broke through. The loud man said a name. Ben held his breath. He didn't look at Leo, just kept his gaze on the pattern of the rug. Yeah. What name did he say? Leo swallowed, his thin shoulders tense. He said, Ben. The boy looked at him, his eyes a well of confusion. He told Mama. He'll find him. Ben will find him. He was mad. The air left Ben's lungs. The room tilted. Asterisk, he'll find him. Ben will find him. Asterisk, it wasn't a promise of return. It was a threat. A curse. Roy, abandoning Leo, had known the ranch belonged to someone named Ben. He hadn't chosen the spot randomly. He had chosen it because of Ben. But why? Ben was certain he had never met a man named Roy in his life. Then, a memory, old and buried, clawed its way to the surface. Years ago, a young hand had worked on the ranch for one turbulent summer. A kid with a quick temper and a knack for mechanics. He'd gotten into a fierce argument with Ben over the maintenance of a tractor, claiming Ben's way was stupid and costly. Ben, much younger and less patient, had fired him on the spot. The kid had spat on the ground, his eyes blazing with a hatred that seemed oversized for the moment. You'll regret this, he'd snarled. You remember my name. It's Roy. Ben had forgotten. It was a minor incident in a long life of hard work and hard decisions. But Roy had remembered. And years later, fleeing with his terrified family, something in his twisted mind had recalled that remote ranch and the man who he felt had wronged him. He hadn't just abandoned Leo. He had delivered him, like a cursed package, to the doorstep of a man he hated. The question, asterisk, did you come back? Asterisk was Leo's hope that his mother had sent help, that the Ben, the loud man mentioned, was a friend. The terrible irony was that he was, but not in any way Roy could have conceived. Ben explained it all to Dale, the old memory tumbling out. It provided the missing motive, a warped sense of revenge. Roy was arrested 3 days later at a roadside diner, his white van parked outside. He confessed to arguing with Liza, to her trying to flee again, but he claimed she had run off into the night and he didn't know what happened to her. He admitted to leaving Leo, coldly stating he knew the boy would be found by the high and mighty rancher who thought he was so great. He had wanted to burden Ben with a problem, to disrupt his orderly life. He had no idea of the heartbreak he'd orchestrated, nor did he seem to care. Liza's fate remained a mystery, a shadow that would likely haunt the hills forever. But for Leo, a path forward slowly began to clear. With Roy in jail and no other family able to take him, the wheels of the system turned, but now with a new consideration. Ben and Marta, their home vetted, their commitment evident, their connection to Leo profound and healing, were asked a question. They didn't hesitate. The paperwork felt endless, but on a bright, clear day with no whisper of wind, it became official. Leo came home to the ranch, this time for good. He didn't arrive in a crate, but holding Marta's hand, a small suitcase containing the toy soldier and a few new clothes in his other hand. The first night, he had the nightmare again. The dark box. But this time, when he cried out, Ben was there in an instant, sitting on the edge of the bed in the room that was now his. No longer a guest, but a son. It's all right, Lee, Ben murmured, using the name his mother had called him. The box is gone. It's just the wind. And for the first time, Leo let himself be gathered into the old cowboy's strong arms. He buried his face in Ben's shoulder, and the sobs he had never cried, for his mother, for the darkness, for the fear, finally broke free. They were heart-wrenching, ragged things, but Ben held him through them all, rocking gently, his own weathered cheek resting against the boy's dark hair. Outside, the vast prairie stretched out under the stars, quiet and immense. The wind, that constant companion, swept through the grass. It no longer sounded like a lonely whistle or a murmur of secrets. To Ben, listening to his boy's breathing steady into sleep, it sounded like a sigh of release. It carried away the echoes of a tiny, heartbreaking voice, and in its place, it brought the deep, quiet peace of a promise kept. The heart that had been broken in a dry creek bed was not mended, for some cracks remained forever. But it was now held together by a love as strong and enduring as the land itself, a love built not from blood, but from a whisper in the silence and the courage to answer it. Sometimes, the most profound connections in our lives come from the most unexpected places. Has an unexpected event ever led you to someone who changed your world?